chapter 34. And you remember when Moses, he comes up to God and he basically says, "Show me your glory." Now, that's a very dangerous thing to do, since no man can behold the glory of God and live. I sometimes wonder if Moses' passion for God was so great that he was willing to commit suicide to see Him to a greater degree. Well, anyways, the Lord tells him, "Look, you cannot see my glory, my face. I'll let you see my back." He hides him in the cleft of the rock. And God passed by, in verse 6 of chapter 34, "Then the Lord passed by in front of him and proclaimed, the Lord God's." Make no mistake who this is. This is truly and really God. "Compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in loving kindness and truth." My dear friend, if we truly understood these words and what they meant, you would all be acting not like a bunch of Baptists. You'd be acting like a bunch of Pentecostals. You'd be jumping up on the seats and probably running across them. I mean, the most dearly and elderly lady here would probably be doing a jig down the aisle. Could you imagine? I want you to think about this for a moment. How much we take for granted. Like, if you have a good husband, you can take that for granted. Why? Have you ever gotten down on your knees and said, "God, I thank you that he's not an adulterer, a drunk, a wife beater, child molester"? See, we take things for granted. You get a good husband, you get a good wife, maybe your children are acting well, and we take that for granted. How often have you got down on your knees and say, "I thank you for what he's not"? I'm always complaining about things he's not, what I want him to be. But just to appreciate the fact of, well, he's not in prison. Now, I also want you to look how sometimes we take for granted who God is. You take for granted that He is compassionate and gracious, that He's slow to anger and abounding in loving kindness and truth. What if He was not? What if God was an omnipotent, which means all-powerful God, and He was the very opposite of compassionate? He was demanding and heartless. He was not gracious, but rude and angry. He was not slow to anger, but He'd get anger that quick. He'd hit anger that quick and kill every one of His foes. That He was not abounding in loving kindness, but abounding in sort of a legalistic, stringent, strict rule-keeping and demanding every ounce of obedience from His people. And what if He wasn't a God of truth, but was a liar? You see, sometimes we just take for granted things, don't we? Maybe it would be good to get down on your knees as soon as you get the time and thank God that He's not like men, that He's not like man, that He's something and someone far, far beyond anything we could ever imagine in all these characteristics. Now, He says in verse 7, "who keeps loving kindness." What does that mean? He's already told us that He's abounding in loving kindness, but He says He also keeps loving kindness. That means He's something that Paul Washer is not. He's faithful. You see, anybody can do just about anything for a short period of time. Really. You know, those who suffer from chronic pain will tell you this. A sharp, horrible pain that lasts a moment is no problem compared to a lesser pain that endures every day, every moment. Pain, pain, pain. Faithfulness for a moment. A man and a woman are married and they're on their honeymoon and they're just full of love, but it lasts only the length of the honeymoon. Faithfulness for a moment is no faithfulness at all. But it says here that He is faithful. He keeps loving kindness for thousands. Once He sets His seal of love upon you, He is faithful to keep it there. He does not retract it. Even though you are faithless, He is faithful. You know, so many times, preaching in different places around the world and the things that the Lord has done, people will come up to me and they'll say, man, you just must, they think things that aren't true. They think, man, Paul Washer doesn't eat. Paul Washer fasts 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and he prays all the time, and he reads his Bible, and he's always loving to his wife and everything. If anyone thinks that way, the only thing they have to do is come stay with me for about a day. And after that, they'll leave in their car praying for my salvation. You see, there are no great men of God. There are only tiny, pathetic men of a great and merciful God. But God's not like us. He truly is faithful, and He keeps loving kindness. And He says that He does it for thousands. This doesn't mean just a few thousand people. Nor does it mean 100,000 people. It's just a way of saying to a number that goes beyond anything we can imagine. His love is not miserly. He's not got a hold of it like this and kind of giving little scraps of it out to people. Nor has He got this little select group of people and He's kind of dishing out love to them and leaving everybody else behind. No, His love is abounding. His loving kindness is abounding. Every man who goes to hell, on the day of judgment, they'll have to lift up their right hand and swear that they have gone to hell against the loving kindness of God. That God was loving toward them. Because He says, He commands us in the Sermon on the Mount to do what? To be perfect like our Father. And how is our Father perfect? He loves His enemies. He pours rain as a blessing down on the evil and the good. He lets His sun shine on the evil and the good. I had a guy tell me one time, well, God hasn't been loving to me. And I said, you're not in hell. So there. God has been loving to you. You see, his problem was what I talked about earlier. He thought he deserved stuff. I had a young man one time, I was praying. There had been people coming down to the front of the church, and I came down to the front of the church. Well, actually, I was preaching, and I got down, was praying with everyone who had come forward and that were weeping and things like that. And a young man came down beside me. And young men, if you're here, I don't want to offend you, but just know this. I've been a young man. I'm still fairly young. Young men can be really stupid. Okay? That's just something that you need to look in the mirror every day and say that a few times. I'm young. I have the great potential of being stupid today, so I need to really be careful what I say. But he came down forward. He plopped down there and was crying out to God. And he said, God, I just want you to give me what I deserve. I've never done this before or since. I stopped praying and I tapped him on the shoulder. And he kept praying, so I tapped harder. And when he looked at me, I said, don't you ever say that again. I said, because if God gives you what you deserve, young man, you die right now and go to hell. Don't ever ask God to give you what you deserve. And be very careful of asking God to give other people what they deserve. If He has shown you mercy, you ought to be asking that He show mercy unto them. Okay? Now, for thousands. Now, I want you to know something. There is no person on this planet, that is going to be able to say on the day of judgment, God did not love me. No one. No one. Do you understand that? If men go to hell, whose fault will it be? It's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? It'll be theirs. It will be theirs. And God will be justified. Now, he says this, and here's the problem. He says, who keeps loving kindness for thousands, who forgives iniquity, transgression, and sin. Now, we haven't got to the problem. Let me explain this. He doesn't just use one word. He uses three. Iniquity, transgression, and sin. This is what He forgives. Iniquity, transgression, and sin. Now, I don't need to go into a word study in Hebrew on every one of these words, because we would be missing the point. What is the point that He's making? I forgive all kinds of sin. I forgive every sin. Do you see that?